So I'm just going to take this on and just to introduce our next panel, which is going to speak about marketing and communications opportunities, redefine and reinvent for business. Moderating this panel today is Arpana Ahuja, and the panelists for this one are Lavang Khare, Neha Singhvi, Kavita Lakhani, and Rekha Rao. So welcome everyone to this, and Arpana, it's over to you now for this.
Thank you so much, Anubhuti, and a very good afternoon to everyone. It's been a wonderful day, the conclave. I think it's very, very nice and thought-provoking, insightful discussions so far, talking about the many challenges that each one of us face, not necessarily as women, but of course with the focus on us being as women professionals. Changing tracks a little bit, I'm here today. It's a real pleasure to moderate this panel with a set of very dynamic agency leaders with us. Focusing on how are we looking to redefine and reinvent for business growth and success. Every major disruption has some winners and losers, and it accelerates pre-existing trends into a tsunami of change. COVID-19 has been no exception. This disruption to our lives, including businesses, have forced us to change the way we behave, collaborate, communicate. It has profoundly changed the business landscape for us. In this session, we are going to explore how has PR been redefined for marketing and brand teams over the past year, and what opportunities have opened for the industry. So diving straight in, let me begin with a question for Kavita, Lavang, and Neha. Do you think brands and businesses have become more willing to take risks as a result of the COVID pandemic?
Thanks for the lovely question, Arpana. If Lavang and the others are kind of okay, I'd love to take this question first. Yeah,
please go ahead. Thanks, Kavita, for jumping in.
Thank you, Arpana. I'd like to say a very happy Women's Day to everybody who is on this panel, as well as watching us in the audience. This has been a fascinating day. I mean, we've learned so much, and this is the last session, so we're going to try and keep it engaging. I just like to say, in response to your question, Arpana, I think undoubtedly the last year has been one of huge risk-taking appetite, and we've seen lots of risks being taken by companies, brands, organizations. And I think, it has also been a year of innovation, huge innovation. And in fact, that was one of the best things that emerged out of COVID, Innovation is all about, a risk-taking ability. It's all about having a challenger mindset. It's all about experimentation, in my view. And I just like to say we've seen it happening like never before in the last year. We should all be very, very fortunate that we've kind of lived through these times. In my view. And, the kind of risks that we've seen have been, I think, in the area of product development, the distribution patterns or the distribution formats have changed for companies. Let me try and give you a few examples to actually, bring it to life, So, for example, the pharma industry, it has gone through massive, massive changes, The development time of a vaccine, for example, was 10 years. But I think in the last year, we've seen that change and get kind of reduced to just 1 year. And I would say, I would term it as hyper innovation. I would also term it as experimentation with product development, with therapy development, with clinical trials, while at the same time, accuracy, efficacy, or patient safety has not been compromised. So I would tend to think that, this would not have happened if COVID did not happen to us. So it's a wonderful example of the risk-taking ability of the industry as a whole. Yeah. If you come closer to B2C companies, for example, before COVID, a lot of them were thinking of going digital or going the e-commerce way. And however, they were very heavily leveraged on the retail distribution model. But I think COVID kind of pushed things, they really, overnight, I think retail channels were closed. Customers, started kind of moving into e-commerce in a big, big way. And I don't think that left an opportunity for a little bit of doubt or a little bit of hesitation or apprehension. Companies were forced to go the phygital way, so they had to look at the retail model which was existing. but had to go into e-commerce in a big way. And in a sense, it was a forced risk for them. They had to experiment. And I would just like to cite one third example, which all of us, without exception, across the globe have experienced, which is a work from home model. You know, for decades and decades, we were all kind of in the work from office mode. Organizations couldn't really think about work from home, or a few organizations thought about it. But the last year has been all about that, you know. And I would say the risk the organizations ran was, productivity loss, or maybe data security, all of those, or a lack of culture, a culture dissipation loss. But, I think all the organizations, without exception, or most organizations, have actually crossed that hurdle. And I think it's been a good thing. The last year has been a huge year of risk-taking. I would say the agility quotient of most organizations has actually been tested. And I think most of them have emerged as winners. So it's a good thing. It has been a good year.
Thanks, Kavita. Maybe Lavan, would you like to add your...
Thanks, Kavita. I think a lot of it has been said by you already, but a couple of things. The pandemic has brought about such a huge change in consumer behavior and sentiment, and the brands have had to evolve on a real-time basis. I would say it's still a mixed response from a risk aspect. A lot of brands have decided to go ahead and take the risk, but there are two sides to a coin at the end of the day, and that's how it works with us in the communication world too. While some brands have become very, very apprehensive, others have evolved and taken that risk, and they've tread upon uncertain territories which they would have never done pre-2020. Of course, there are brands which have caused disruptions all through the years. But today, there's an appetite for change, and that's a great starter from a risk perspective. There are a few things I think the brands are definitely doing, and Kavita gave us some nice, interesting examples, and I will just also mention a couple of them. Brands have become very transparent and empathetic today. If you remember a year ago, and I think it's going to be exactly a year, since most of us have been working from home, the brand voice today has many, many delicate nuances when we look at it. A brand cannot be commercially exploitative in today's world. It could have done so maybe a couple of years ago, and the last 1 year completely changed that sort of thinking. In the current situation, in this year, we still don't have all answers, and we should be able to acknowledge that as communications professionals, and also from a brand perspective. So when you look at it, media has been used in a very, very agile manner today. And digital, of course, has gone on the forefront, more so than anybody had ever thought about it. There is access to remote production, there's access to creative capacity. And as the crisis evolved, the brands just learned to work from wherever they were. I want to take two simple examples of two shoe companies. When you look at Nike, what did they say? The first message was play inside, play for the world. They just adapted in spite of the fact that they were a shoe brand. And Bata, they went ahead and did a campaign on Park Your Shoes. They said the shoes will take you wherever you want to be, and emphasized on the fact that until you can go out, park your shoes. So when you look at it, yes, there are certain brands which went ahead and took that brand sort of a, if I may say, disruptive behavior. Thirdly, there has to be goodness. And when you take risk, the goodness needs to be associated with the brand in every manner possible. The simplest thing that people did was sanitizers and masks, right? But even if you look at adult beverage brands like a Diageo, or you look at AB InBev, they repurposed all their alcohol manufacturing capabilities to make sanitizers and to do short-term supplies. So it was risk at the end of the day. For some, it's paid off really well. But the fact is, it's also adaptability and risk at the core. So it's all about feel good, It's all about alleviating that anxiety and promoting the positive messaging in a right manner. And also, more importantly, I think from a risk perspective, it's about tracking and analyzing trends and mapping scenarios, because I started with the fact that the consumer sentiment and behavior changed altogether in last 1 year. All of us who are on this panel, and I've been listening to the earlier couple of panels as well, all of us changed as individuals, right? Can we ever imagine that we would have stayed at home for a year and worked so efficiently? It's a risk that our own employers took as well. And each one of us works for a brand, which is definitely a brand which stands for certain values and principles. last, and I won't take another moment, Arpana, I think it's most important to be adapt to this change and new ways of working. That's also a risk. So for me, it's still a 50-50. Brands have taken a risk. They've adapted to it. Some of them have been successful. And I think this year has made us learn and reimagine ourselves totally.
Thanks, Lavang. In fact, so Neha, what I'd love to know from you is, I think we're talking about taking risks, we're talking about changes, but what I'd really like a point of view would be on, do we really see companies are being more risk averse, right? Because in terms of the whole narrative of kind of all the do's and don'ts, do we really see that change there?
Yeah. So Arpana, actually, you're saying exactly what I had in my mind. The fact that, I agree with, both Kavita and Lavang and the points that they made. But I think what happened last year was the biggest risk that any company or any business could have foreseen in their, in their number of years that they've been around. And what happened is brands have been agile. They were nimble. They adapted to the changing dynamics. But I feel that if you think about taking the risk appetite, has it increased? I would rather say no, because there is a greater appetite for trying out new things, right? There is innovation, and innovation has come in all forms, right? The shift to digital, from digital being a facilitator to being an accelerator, it almost happened overnight. And there were a lot of investments made very quickly. But does that mean that tomorrow the brands are now sort of looking at taking more, ways, or, sort of having a larger risk appetite to go on for uncharted territories? Maybe no. I think what has happened is, the focus has moved from experience to data. The focus is so much on data today, which is helping them chart out this innovation or these newer territories. And, just to give you an example, okay, a client like Uniqlo, the brand's been around, almost completed a year last year, is largely known for its heat tech products, Airism, products which are very, very well accepted during the winters, right? Now, they're not in e-commerce. E-commerce wasn't launched then, but they knew this is the right time. So they experimented, right? They experimented with an online portal to ensure home delivery across 17,000 PIN codes in the country. Now, that's because they wanted to reach out to the customers. So yes, brands did go all out, went digital in every way possible, because there was a larger need to meet the business requirements. Or if, say, you look at an ITC Savlon, they've been in the hand washing and the sanitizer business for a long time. But they realized there is market opportunity. Who would have imagined a brand like ITC Savlon would come up with 11 SKUs in a matter of 6 months? Where you've seen the innovation happening once in a year in the sector. And similarly, there were so many other brands that did that. So I feel that, the shift really for businesses was more, they adapted fast. That was the need of the hour. Risk appetite, maybe more, I'm skewed towards saying no. But yes, I think it's for each their own. And, tomorrow you may see a few businesses actually behaving differently. And that probably time would tell.
So I think what I'm gathering here is we're looking at, of course, need necessitating us between a sink or a swim. So you kind of swim with the flow. But I think picking up on something that Lavang also said. So therefore, are we looking at that businesses, yes, are adapting for change, but is it change or is it transformation? Because see, change is temporary, right? You can go back to doing what you were doing, but transformation is truly, reinventing and then not, paving the way forward and not going back. So Lavang, what would you say? Is there an adaptation for change, or is it transformation that we are looking at today?
So, I think what you said is so right. It is an adaptation for change. It's not a true transformation. And that's why I said it's a 50-50 situation, Alpana, because brands are thinking all the time, and they're operating and trying to look at new ways during these uncertain and unprecedented circumstances at the end of the day. We will learn together, right? There'll be confidence and there'll be humility at the same time. So it is adapting to change. If it's one thing for companies to be able to recognize how they need to redefine or reinvent the way they are in terms of brands, but it's for the businesses to be able to succeed because it is an age of disruption at the end of the day. And transformation begins with adaptation. So I don't think you can isolate the two from each other. It's going to be a gradual adaptation and change. And transformation that is sudden will anyways not last very long, right? So it has to be a gradual adaptation process where we are testing waters and we respond to change, which shapes the course of transformation at the end of the day. And the speed at which we adapt and the way we do it will determine that course. And that will vary one organization from the other as we move ahead. That's my view on it, Arpana.
Thanks, Neha. Anything, since you also touched upon this a little bit earlier, good to get a quick view on this.
I think, the base of this can really be found in the fact that, we are human beings at the end of the day, right? We are very hopeful that things will go back to where they were. So while, yes, businesses have adapted, but at the end, and they have been innovating constantly. I think the sort of innovation we've seen in the last year, one wouldn't have imagined. Like, there are business models that have come up, right? We were talking about digital. Suddenly what happened is people realized reaching out to tier 3, 4 cities is just so much far more simpler than would have ever imagined earlier, because suddenly digital consumption went up and how there, right? So yes, does that mean that brands have changed the way they market and they communicate themselves? Yes, absolutely yes. We have models like ShareChat and Moj, platforms like them that came up. They've been built to leverage language, right? You have seen beauty brands coming up with complete new lines on wellness products based on conscious living, responsible sourcing. Yes, it could be, if tomorrow this is something which works well, this could be a transformation for business for them. But, I still feel it's adaptation. It's a lot of innovation. And we've seen some really good examples coming out of it, something from all of us to learn from.
So it's interesting what you said, Neha, about in terms of, even consumers, right? Like, if you're looking at the digital landscape, last year we had, senior citizens, a number of senior citizens being on platforms that we wouldn't have ever imagined them to be. But my question here is also, therefore, are they going to continue to be on those platforms going forward, or was it a temporary thing? Kavita, I'd love to have a view from you on this.
I was just absolutely waiting for this question. So I have a contrarian view to, to Lawang and Neha's point. I do not think for a minute that this is just adapting to change. I truly believe that businesses have transformed. A good number, a majority of businesses have transformed. And I think COVID has actually pushed companies, over the technology tipping point. And it's transformed businesses because of the technology that's now being used very, very frequently by all of us, including the senior citizens that you talked about, Arpana. I was just reading this very interesting survey that McKinsey has done recently. And it was a survey of, that was conducted of senior executives worldwide in Asia Pacific, in the European countries, as well as in the US. And I think there was a unanimous opinion that, the digitization of, if you were to say, the supply chain interactions or the customer interactions has been accelerated by 3 to 4 times, definitely 3 to 4 years. And I would say also, when you are delivering products or services, the digitization of that has been accelerated 10 plus years, and these changes are big. In 1 year to be able to leapfrog to that extent is massive. And I don't think there's going to be any going back for sure. So I truly believe that this has been one of the most transformative years for businesses. This is going to change the way economies function, the way organizations function. This is not small band-aid kind of change or adapting or any of that. Of course, you've started on that process, but this is going to change the way we do things as we go forward. Nobody is going back to the old ways, including our senior citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Kavita. Indeed, even I think the general, what I'm hearing from everybody here is that, yes, adaptation, change is there, but what we are very sure of, whether it is actual true transformation or kind of on a journey to transformation, but there is certainly no going back. We are truly on a trajectory for growth. And talking about change, I think brings me to another thing. Change is that, are we seeing a change, for all of you in the agency business, are we seeing a change in the budgets shifting for PR? I think if last year, one thing that really stood out was underlining the value for PR, right? Do you really feel in an integrated, media and marketing communications world that we've truly evolved into, do you feel that PR is in the driving seat and therefore the budgets are shifting to PR? Is that something that you're seeing? Rekha, I would love to hear from you on this. Rekha, you're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Arpana, for the question. So definitely there is a lot more prominence to PR in terms of, how marketers are probably looking at it. And I think somewhere around the way, I don't think it needed a pandemic to make that shift happen, because that shift had actually started happening over the last 3 to 4 years. But the pandemic, of course, brought it all to life. And for the brands who did not know the value of PR or were not using it effectively, maybe the last year just forced them to start looking at PR as a very, very reliable alternative to advertising that most brands usually tend to invest in, and drove the attention to how PR can still drive conversations and keep the brands in the right context in the consumer's mind. So that definitely has happened last year. But talking about whether PR is in the driving seat, I think today, if you look at communications, it's more about the creativity being agnostic. I personally have interacted with brands, and I've been very fortunate to also work with clients who do not look at PR as just, maybe what it was 5 years or 10 years back, where you're all about free coverage and free volumes of free coming. You're not the free agency anymore. And I've been very fortunate to work with some of the best companies in India who look at PR as being, agencies that can come up independently with creative concepts, who can drive concepts, and who can actually drive communication programs independent of advertising. So that is where I guess there is a lot of prominence in terms of what we can do as an industry. However, I think what is important for us to realize is that today, because there is, advertising, of course, is coming back, and everybody's looking at advertising on digital platforms. But a huge amount of impetus is also with influencer marketing, and a huge amount of focus is also on using nano influencers and macro influencers to push brands and to communicate the reliable, the credible communications around brands, and which is where I guess the pie is something which is a very cluttered market. Almost every other agency comes and says, whether it's digital, whether it's media buying, whether it's advertising, whether it's PR, all of them come and talk about, how influencer marketing is something that they all do. But I believe, and not because I'm from this industry, but I truly believe that influencer marketing as a strategy is something which is owned and driven best when it is owned by PR agencies, because one, it's about content, and it is about credible content. And if the agencies which know best how to use content in a reliable, credible, and subtle way in order to, truly bring to effect the subliminal marketing part, then I think it is no other than PR that actually does that well. And a lot of brands, I'm very happy to say, are parking the influencer budgets and influencer campaign monies with the PR agencies and not with their digital agencies. So that's I think a great move forward.
If I can do one quick follow-up question on that. You said most clients are doing that, but in cases where clients are not, how do you win the battle there, and how do you change the needle there?
I think, the biggest thing is somewhere, if they're not doing it, then they're still dated in terms of how they look at communications. In their mind, the minute a PR agency comes and says that they're able to do this, the first question is, but why would you do it? I have my advertising or my digital agency already doing it. So what are you going to bring to the floor? So for me, it's about educating the client and telling them the difference of, when a PR agency does it, why does it work even more effectively than when probably a media buying agency goes and buys influencers and just pushes a campaign out, which is so different from how credibly PR agencies, manage content. Fortunately, I haven't had to face many of those clients, so I'm lucky there. But I know that it's a battle to get the mindset shift, because the minute you say PR, they still think it's free. somewhere in their mind, PR is equal to free, irrespective of whether you're doing influence or you're doing, editorial for them.
Thanks, Rekha. Neha, coming to you, given that PR Pandit is known to do so many integrated marketing communications, where do you think has the needle moved in context of, say, last year, especially, right? In terms of how have we changed the conversations there, and how have we completely, totally taken the driving seat?
Sure. So there has been a shift. There's been a shift, right? PR has been the building block for brand reputation, right? But the pandemic did see entire campaigns, launches that were driven by PR alone, right? So I think for me, the victory wasn't whether we get to do one portion or the other, right? And I absolutely understand when you talk about influencer marketing, PR Pandit has been one of the first adopters of influencer marketing in the country, if I may say, when it comes to really doing large scale influencer engagements. But the fact that, today public opinion is swaying decisions and advocacy has been so critical. It has never been so important than it is today, right? We've seen so many examples in the last year where we saw the entire PR campaign was driven by, the entire marketing campaigns were driven by PR agencies. And this has not just helped in creating visibility for a brand or a product, but it has actually helped in achieving a larger business objective. If I may give you an example, say a brand like Perfetti, they have Center Fresh mints, right? The PR campaign came up with the whole idea of keeping mints relevant through the pandemic, where there was a full repositioning and repurposing around the product, where campaigns like Stay Fresh and Stay Happy behind the mask, where you had freshness kits being sent to frontline workers, whether it's hospitals, the traffic, nurse, doctors, all of them, and it gave a complete new consumption push for mints. Right now, this is a PR-led campaign. Now, later on, it was adapted. Of course, there was digital marketing around it. Of course, there was money spent on digital to push and get more amplification. But I think the win is that because the fact PR works so closely when it comes to brand reputation and the understanding the finer nuances of what goes into messaging and how you communicate on a brand, gave that extra push. We've seen how an upcoming grooming company, and without naming them, who have large investments from FMCG giants, saw distributor deals being closed when they were written off favorably in financial publications. So I think, yes, there's been a shift, and the shift really, if I could, bring an analogy here, would be from filling in the front passenger car seat to now being the co-driver and navigator of the rally car. This has been the shift. And, I just feel, crisis often triggers a lot of significant changes, and some of them are permanent. So I'm hoping that this shift and this validation is going to be permanent in nature as we move ahead.
Thanks, Neha. Kavita, I'd love to know, on this same theme, when we are looking at a mix of the paid, owned, and earned, right? But the expectation from PR agencies is always about it has to be earned. You guys, influencer marketing, you're asking us for money. I thought you guys were going to give us the earned piece. How do you then again navigate that landscape to show the value?
So, my view on this, Arpana, is one is that the number of those kind of requests are decreasing. And I think the important bit is for brands, who need to be educated in a sense to understand what is the central role of public relations. And I would think, that is something that has happened very effectively over the last couple of years, and more so during this crisis, So, we all know as human beings, in times of crisis, like what Neha was saying, people quickly turn to a brand or a product that they trust, that they've heard of. And I think that, that's been engaging with them, very, very actively. in various means. And I would say the central role of PR is to ensure a good reputation is built. And the mechanics of that, or the logistics, whether you're doing it through, editorial media, you're doing through influencer engagement, or however, I don't think that's really important to clients. And I don't even think they actually think about PR any longer as only on media. I think they've transcended that mindset already. I think what has happened in the last year, certainly, is that PR has taken on more of a central role in integrated communications. It's more of an anchor discipline, if I were to say so. And it has earned an equal, I would say, an equal space on the table when you're thinking of campaigns. I liked what Rekha said earlier on, she said very interestingly that creativity is discipline agnostic. And I think whichever discipline, whether it's PR, whether it's the advertising creative teams, or whether it's the digital teams today, whoever displays creativity and brings a solution to the table, that's the discipline that is in the driver's seat. It's not necessarily PR, or it's not necessarily the advertising guys. But the sea change is that PR didn't have a voice at the table earlier, and it does now. And that's a good shift to have.
Absolutely. And I think a big pat on the back to everybody in this industry for making that, that change and earning. I use the word earn, right? It's not only about demanding, but I think truly earning a seat on the table. But, picking up on, you spoke about trust, and that brings me to, another point on how brands show up is, essential in building the reputation, right? In terms of, and purpose has been there, always kind of been there, but I think the authentic presence that we bring into the communication mix is what makes a difference. And I think last year, that was another thing that we saw, how brands showed up, made that little difference for us. Rekha, this is a question for you. What would you think has changed for brands to be seen as trustworthy? Is there now, do you see a higher integration of marketing communication with ESG and CSR? Because, with the whole environmental, social, and corporate governance, norms coming much more to the forefront, where do you think the needle has shifted?
So very interestingly, just before the pandemic hit us, sometime at the end of 2019, we at Zeno had conducted a survey called as the Zeno Strength of Purpose Survey. And I'm talking specifically with regards to the data that we collected from India. So about 1,000+ respondents were asked, questions around, what purpose means to them. And our main intent was to figure out whether purpose was just about nomenclature, which was a feel-good thing for organizations, or was it really something which also motivated consumers to move towards picking brands, choosing brands, buying brands, or staying with brands? And I think that is what was a core intent of the survey. And what came out was really interesting, that 98% of the people actually said that they truly believe that they will support companies which actually have genuine purpose, and they want to kind of be associated with companies or brands that genuinely have purpose as part of their integrated mandate. And I think the other thing which they said, which was very interesting from a marketing perspective, was that they were willing to buy a brand 4 times more if it was seen as having a genuine purpose, and they were willing to back a brand 5 times more if it was in crisis, or if it was going through a bad patch. And I think that data actually tells us that the generational shift in terms of how brands and products are looked at, which is not just for functionality, but also for something beyond functionality, is what is a great way forward in terms of why brands and companies and corporates should look at purpose as a genuine investment and as a behavior, and not just as something that they would want to kind of talk of for generating some very feel good coverage for themselves. So I think that's the big thing. And the other thing also is that when we look at the consumers and we look at the 2 generations, so there was One was us who defied everything and said that, no, we want our world to be different from the deprived world of our parents. Then came our children who said that, okay, now I need to live by the norms of my parents. At the same time, I also now want to kind of establish my individuality. And that was where the millennial conflict of behavior came in. And then now we have the next gen, the Gen Zs, who are much more definite about what they want, who are much more willing to take matters in their own hand, and they're not afraid to defy. They're not afraid to stand up for what they believe in. And I think this big thing of the big shift of the Gen Zers who are willing to stand up and against their parents' wishes or against their social, followed social norm, are willing to stand up for what they believe in is a big shift in terms of how purpose is looked at. And some of the recent events that have happened in the in our country actually talk about how the voice of the youth, and especially the youngsters, and I'm talking about the 16-year-olds, the 17-year-olds, the 19-year-olds who are willing to stand up and talk for what they believe in. So purpose is definitely a behavior which we need to imbibe, and genuinely need to imbibe it as an organization, and not just an activity that corporates and brands have to do, or not just a marketing initiative that they run year after year. They need to believe in it and they need to stick with it. And unfortunately, again, I've had the good fortune of working with some of the best brands, both at Unilever and P&G, who have genuinely invested in purpose much before this entire conversation has actually come in place. And I think those brands, it's being paid off now, because that investment was made almost a decade back. It was not made today when a conversation is happening. So whether we talk about the Unilever's sustainability, and mapping themselves to the sustainability development goals, or we talk about P&G's socially relevant campaigns, which have actually shifted a mindset in terms of how people actually think about certain social issues, are all genuine investments that brands have been making in terms of what purpose looks like. And the last point, even recently, Women's Day just went by yesterday, and we could see a lot of brands talking about women. But again, how many brands were there in it only because it was Women's Day? And how many brands actually live in it because it is something that they abide by or believe in for the rest of the year? So of course, our some of the brands that we handle, like Levi's, which has the I Shape My World campaign, or Nike, which Lawang spoke about, these are brands that have stood with purpose as a behavior and not just as something that they do on Women's Day as an activity. So I guess that is the definite change I would see, and I would definitely urge for most of the clients that we work with, we urge them to think about purpose as a behavior and not just as an activity.
So very well said, Rekha. I think what we are looking at is basically how do we integrate our CSR, our ESG into the brand communications in an organic way and not in a promotional way, right? So that it is truly authentic when we show up in front of our consumers. Kavita, I would love a point of view here from you, if you have an example perhaps to share with us.
I just want to say that I completely agree with Rekha. And I just like to layer one point, over and above what she said. Today, I'm also going to elaborate on what ESG stands for, because I understand that we have a young audience that's watching us. So for all those who don't know what it means, it stands for environmental, social, and governance criteria. And I would say today, 80% of global investments take place on the basis of ESG metrics. So I can't stress enough on the importance of integrating ESG messaging in your in the communication that we do, because it's important to build trust and stakeholder confidence. And I'm not talking about shareholder confidence or customer confidence. I'm talking about all stakeholders. So I think it's very important. I would also like to say that a minimum 60% of our communication messaging must be centered and focused around ESG messaging. It should be built in very seamlessly. And I think a number of companies are doing a great job. I think Rekha mentioned a few, Lawang has mentioned a few, but I'd like to talk about Godrej, Dabur, P&G, HUL, of course, which Rekha mentioned, Asian Paints. They're doing a stellar job of actually weaving ESG messaging, to tell their brand story, to talk about their products and talk about their approach towards, creating the products that they actually sell in the market today. So incredibly important point. It's not only about, and CSR is a subset of ESG. So I would think it's important to kind of work around that.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Very well said. Changing gears quickly and mindful of time, we have only 3 minutes, and I'd love to take a few questions that I can see in the chat box as well. But the last question, I think, since we're talking about transformation, we've kind of spoken about what last year has shown, but taking a little bit more futuristic, if you may, I think last year also brought out how, in absence of, say, certain, lack of resources, some marketing functions really took the help of AI and how it enabled businesses. So are we, we know that so far AI has had not the most significant role in, say, marketing communications. When do you think AI will have a significant role, and which industries are going to lead that? Neha, if I can start with you and go down to Rekha and Lawang with two very quick points here, so that then we can move to the questions.
Yeah. So we've already witnessed firms investing into data and analytics to drive messaging, especially headlines which are based on the predicted sentiments. I think by the very fact that the early adaptation of AI in business was led by healthcare, financial services, education, retail, and of course the tech startups. These sectors are also, what we've seen is is using AI a lot more when it comes to using it for communications and picking out the right narrative and engaging with audiences. I also feel that, just in the days to come, we'll witness a much stronger integration of data intelligence with human intelligence. And that's really going to help us in coming up with more effective narration for brands, products as we move forward.
Yeah. Rekha, which industry do you think is really going to lead this?
I think any industry, any organization or company or brand that has an intense consumer facing will have to, or already does depend on AI in terms of, figuring out the kind of, and especially when you relate it back to communications, right? So I mean, a very interesting thing, like, and I'm mentioning that because I'm working on that campaign right now. I'm working on the client right now. The Tata Sampann campaign. It's very interesting to know that the packaging of Tata Sampann was all driven by AI. It was driven by a research that was done where, instead of doing focus group testing of the packaging, they had used, the neuro programming, and they had basically gauged the responses of people of what they reacted to on the packaging, the colors or the food or whatever, and integrated that back into how the packaging was created. Now, if that is not using it for marketing, then what is? And just another client of ours, Spotify, a lot of the work that we do on Spotify is data-based. A lot of, to understand what kind of campaigns to run, or, the kind of trends that we are predicting, in terms of music, or even, playlists which are compiled on Spotify and given from individual to individual, depending upon their usage and their pattern. Everything is, again, AI. So at the end of the day, I guess, wherever there is data and behavior coming together, AI will play a very, very, very important role. And to me, that would be anything which is consumer interface, which has millions of people dictating how, they function or interface with a brand. I think AI is going to dominate those industries.
No, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I think being mindful of time. And
Arpana, can I just add one point? Because we are talking AI and we are the communications people. I think AI is playing a very important role for us in PR. At the end of the day, Meltwater is the perfect example that most people are using. So when you said which sector, and I know if you're mindful of time, there may be healthcare, manufacturing, mobile gaming, etc. But for us, AI is short. It's not about tech alone. It's about the PR world and the communication. And Meltwater is the perfect example.
So I think a very clear takeaway, future is already here. It's for us to make. And if I may just quickly sum up, I think even the session before, we were talking about changes and adaptation. I think success, if we were to take away from here, success is all about evolution, right? And challenges are but opportunities to invent and reinvent. And just like brands and products, I think even equally for all of us, it is about being updated and constantly changing and reinventing. And then on that note, thank you so much to everybody tuned in. Thank you, Reputation Today, and the wonderful volunteers who put this together. It's been a pleasure. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much. I think
I'm waiting to hear the
what a
poem
stellar,
that you wrote.
yes, the poems here. What a stellar panel once again. And I think this one, sort of brought all of those conversations into realistic narratives of what we can do really as an industry to look forward, and infusing everything that we spoke about into this. So here's the poem. Innovation, challenger mindsets and risk-taking, and leapfrogging technology, testing the status quo. Change is an evolution of transparency and empathetic voices, nuanced sharing and absorbed shifts. Change of work and the dynamic, agility and appetite for new things. Digital, from being a facilitator to an accelerator, changing the scenario for good. Swimming with the flow, is it change or is it transformation? There's a lot more prominence to communication. It's not the pandemic that triggered the shift. Advertising and marketing impetus, influencer programs, all about creativity and content. Changes in the status quo and shift. How do you navigate the landscape to show the value? Brands were getting educated to relook at population, the mechanics of sound reputation. Channels and mediums irrespective. Transcending mindsets. Centrally integrated communications with equal spaces at the table. Creativity that's discipline agnostic and bringing solutions to the fore. Earning that seat with trust and purpose, shifting to newer narratives. Infusing tech and AI, the future is really here. It's for us to make it what we want it to be. The success is in evolution, embracing change and reinvention. So there you go. That was the piece for this panel. Thank you so much, panelists. It was a pleasure to have and listen to all of you here.